All right, so everyone's talking about Malibu Rising, but like, is it actually worth the read? Should we spend our time on it? We are going to figure that out today. We're going to unpack all the hype and, the criticisms and whether this book belongs on your beach towel or maybe like in the donation bin.
Well, let's cut to the chase. Malibu Rising is a fun read. It's fast-paced. You'll get through it, but I don't think it's going to win any big awards. Like, it's more beach read than like, I don't know, deep thinking. You know what I mean?
So maybe not for like those late night reading sessions where you're really pondering life, but what about those of us who just want a good escape? Like, is this the book for that?
If you like stories about families, a little bit of glitz and glam, maybe some secrets, oh, and a good dose of California sunshine, then yeah, Malibu Rising will probably work for you.
Okay, I'm getting interested. But I have seen some reviews that say the writing is sort of, I don't know, simple?
Yeah, that's something people mention. Reid's style is definitely more about telling you than showing you. You know, you're told how the characters feel, what they're thinking, instead of seeing it through what they do or say. Like, we're told Nina's the responsible sister, but does she really act that way?
Ah, so it's more about keeping the story moving than getting deep into each character. But isn't that part of what's fun about a beach read? Just like that easy breezy feeling?
Oh, for sure. And Malibu Rising nails that. It's a total page turner. But I could see if you loved Reid's other stuff, like Daisy Jones and the Six or Evelyn Hugo, you might want a little more.
That's interesting. I did love Daisy Jones. Those characters felt so real. Their voices were so distinct. Does Malibu Rising not have that?
It's the multiple points of view in Malibu Rising. Sometimes they even change in the middle of a paragraph, which can be a little jarring. It's supposed to give you insights into each character, but it can kind of muddy the waters, make their voices blend a bit.
I could see that. Like you're getting snippets of people's thoughts, but not really getting to know them deeply. Okay, but let's talk about the Riva siblings. They're the core of this book, right? 4 kids, each with their own dreams and struggles, all dealing with a famous father who wasn't really there. Do they come across as real? Relatable?
The way the siblings relate to each other is definitely strong. You can see how their childhood with Riva, him being famous and then gone, has impacted them. Like Nina, the oldest, becomes the caretaker, almost like a mom to her siblings.
Right. I could see how that would connect with readers, having to step up and be responsible because of family stuff. But are they all just defined by their dad being absent?
And that's maybe where it could have gone deeper. We get glimpses of their individual struggles, but sometimes they feel a little bit like types the responsible one, the rebel, the dreamer. We're told about their pain, missing their dad, but it doesn't always hit you in the feels.
So, believable as a family, but maybe not as unique individuals.
That's it. But, sometimes a book is just supposed to be fun, and Malibu Rising does that well.
All right, so not a deep character study. Got it. But how about the plot itself? Anything new and exciting there?
So the main event, Nina's big end-of-summer party that literally goes up in flames, that's definitely gripping. It kind of reminds me of Little Fires Everywhere, secrets, betrayals, all this tension exploding on one crazy night.
Whoa, sounds intense. I can practically hear the fire crackling and everyone freaking out. But is it all a bit much? Like, over the top?
It can get a little soap opera-ish, yeah. Like all the descriptions of what they're wearing, it really captures the 80s, but sometimes it's a bit too much. And the romances, they happen so fast. A little too much love at first sight for me.
Right. Sometimes you want more realism in your reading, right? Less instant love. But I get it. Drama can be fun, especially when you're looking for pure escape.
So how does this book stack up against Reid's other books? That's tough. It has that same vibe as Daisy Jones and Evelyn Hugo, fame, family secrets, ambition. And get this, Riva, the dad in Malibu Rising, he's in all 3 books.
Wait, really? So it's like one big world for all these Taylor Jenkins Reid books. I'm even more intrigued now. But does Malibu Rising measure up to those other books? Or is it not as good?
I'd say it depends on what you want. If you want the same level of emotional depth as Daisy Jones or Evelyn Hugo, you might be a little disappointed. A lot of reviewers felt those books had a grittiness, a realness that Malibu Rising doesn't quite have.
Okay, so maybe Malibu Rising is like a fun summer fling, and Daisy Jones is the epic love story you never forget. But even if it's not Reid's best work, it still sounds pretty good.
Yeah, and sometimes that's all you want, right? A book that pulls you in and keeps you entertained the whole way through.
You sold me. I'm putting it on my to-read list, but I'll keep in mind it's a light, fun read. Nothing too serious. But you said Riva is in other books?
Yes. It's how Reid connects her stories, creating this whole world where characters pop up in different books, different timelines. In Malibu Rising, you see Mick when he's younger, before the stuff in the other books.
That's really cool. It's like a bonus for fans who have read her other books. So even if Malibu Rising isn't as deep as her other books, it still adds to the bigger picture. So I know it's a fun escape, perfect for like a day at the beach or something. But what about those of us looking for something, I don't know, more meaningful? Does Malibu Rising have anything deeper to offer?
You know, beneath all the glam and drama, Malibu Rising does touch on some bigger ideas, especially the impact our parents' choices have on us.
You mean like how Mick Riva's choices affected his kids? That's definitely something I'd like to hear more about.
It makes you think about the legacy we get from our parents, the good and the bad, and how those things shape our own choices, in love, family, even our careers.
Okay, I'm seeing there's more to this book than meets the eye. It's not just sunshine and parties, it's about real stuff. But before we go too deep, what about those criticisms we see in reviews? The ones that left people feeling like, meh?
Besides the writing style, people often say the characters aren't developed enough. We get glimpses into their thoughts and feelings, but not enough to really connect with them.
So it's like the plot is driving the story, not the characters themselves.
Yeah, and some readers might feel disconnected from the heart of the story because of that. Also, sometimes the drama feels a little forced, like Reid's pushing for a big emotional moment without really setting it up.
So it's not exactly subtle, more like an emotional roller coaster.
Exactly. It works for some people, not for others. And then there's the ending.
Ooh, the ending. Without spoiling it, does it work or does it fall flat?
It's gotten mixed reactions. Some thought it was too neat and tidy, like Reid was trying to tie everything up perfectly. Others liked the hopefulness, that feeling of fresh starts, even after all the chaos.
Interesting. It sounds like the ending could be a love it or hate it kind of thing, depending on what you're looking for. Okay, we've talked about the writing style, the characters, how it compares to Reid's other books. But big picture, is Malibu Rising worth the hype?
I would say it's worth reading if you want a fun, engaging read, a good story about family. But if you're looking for something super deep with complex characters and big ideas, you might want to adjust your expectations. It's a beach read, plain and simple, perfect for when you just want to get lost in a story.
Gotcha. So maybe it won't change your life, but it might make your day a little better. And sometimes that's enough, right? But, you said Mick Riva shows up in other Reid books.
Yeah, it's her clever way of connecting her stories. She builds this whole world where characters cross paths across different books, different times. In Malibu Rising, you see Mick in his younger days before the events of the other books.
That's really neat. It's like an Easter egg for fans. So even if Malibu Rising isn't as nuanced, it still contributes to this bigger world. Okay, so we've talked about the writing, the characters, the plot, and some of the deeper themes. But there's still a lot more to discuss, so stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dives. We'll be exploring those themes in more detail, looking at how the book portrays ambition, family dynamics, and the choices that shape our lives.
And we'll also tackle those common criticisms, figuring out if Malibu Rising really lives up to all the hype. So if you're still on the fence about this book, or if you're just excited to dive deeper, make sure you come back for the next part of our discussion.
We'll be back after a short break. So we've said that Malibu Rising is a real page-turner, but maybe not the deepest character study. But you were saying it deals with some big themes like the cost of ambition and how parents' choices affect their kids. Let's dig into that a bit more.
What's really interesting is how Reid contrasts Mick Riva's ambition with his kids. You see how his drive for fame, always needing to be the center of attention, that's what leads him to leave his family.
It's like a warning, right? Like success can cost you a lot, especially if you don't prioritize the right things. But what about the kids? Do they end up wanting the same thing or do they push back against it?
It's kind of both, actually. They're all clearly marked by their dad being absent, how his choices impacted their childhood, but they each deal with it differently. Nina, the oldest, she gets super responsible, almost takes on the parent role with her younger siblings. Her ambition goes into her surfing, always striving for perfection, which is kind of her dad and his fame, right?
So she's both following in his footsteps and trying to do things her way, trying to succeed but on her own terms.
Exactly. And then there's Jay. He's more rebellious, impulsive. He's got talent, just like his father, but he can't commit, can't stick with things. Almost like he's self-sabotaging, afraid to reach his full potential.
I can see how that comes from his dad leaving. Like, what's the point of trying if it might end up hurting the people you love?
Right, it's this fear of making the same mistakes, becoming the person you never wanted to be. And then you've got Hud. He's quieter, more thoughtful. He's into photography, capturing moments, holding on to memories. It's like the opposite of his dad's fleeting fame.
Like, he wants something that lasts, something with more meaning than being a celebrity. What about Kit, the youngest? She seems the most free-spirited. Like, she's not tied to her father's past as much.
Kit's interesting. She represents hope, like breaking free from this cycle of messed up stuff. She's still figuring things out, finding her own way, but there's this lightness about her. It suggests she might actually escape the shadows of her family.
So the Riva siblings each show different ways of dealing with their baggage from their parents, like trying to figure out who they are while also carrying the weight of the past.
Absolutely. And that's what makes their story relatable, even though their lives are pretty extraordinary. We all have those influences, things that shape who we become, even if we don't realize it.
It's that nature versus nurture thing, right? How much of who we are comes from our genes and how much comes from our environment, our experiences, what the people around us do.
In Malibu Rising, it doesn't really get into those big philosophical questions, but it does show how those forces work together, shaping us in ways we may not even see.
Okay, so we've got ambition, family dynamics, and this nature versus nurture idea. There's a lot more going on in this book than I thought at first, but some reviewers say Malibu Rising is kind of obvious with its themes. Like, is Reid hitting us over the head with her message?
There are parts where the symbolism feels a little on the nose. The metaphor's too direct, like the fire motif. Fire representing passion and destruction. It's used a lot, maybe too much.
So it's not really subtle, more of a direct approach.
Yeah, it's less about you figuring things out and more about Reid telling you what to think. But that can work for some readers who like that clear, straightforward style.
Sometimes you want a book that makes you think, other times you just want a story that lays it all out. But what about the overall message of the book? What is Reid ultimately trying to say about family, ambition, the choices we make?
At its core, I think Malibu Rising is a story about forgiveness. It's about seeing the flaws in ourselves and the people we love, understanding how we've been hurt and how we've hurt others, and then finding a way to move on with kindness and grace.
So even with all the drama, the heartbreak, the betrayals, there's still hope. Like, people can find a way to come together again.
Exactly. And that's powerful, especially in a world where it's so easy to hold grudges, to dwell on the past. Malibu Rising reminds us that letting go of our anger and the mistakes other people make, that's important for healing and growing.
Okay, I'm starting to see this book on a deeper level. It's not just a light read. It's a story that encourages us to face our own issues, deal with the messy reality of relationships, and choose empathy and forgiveness instead of anger and resentment.
And those are themes that everyone can relate to, no matter who they are or what they've been through. We've all been hurt, we've all messed up, and we all want connection and understanding.
You're right. It's that shared human experience that makes Malibu Rising work, even with its flaws. It reminds us that we're all in this together, trying to figure out life, love, and family. But I'm still wondering how Malibu Rising fits in with Reid's other books. We talked about Riva being in other stories, but is reading Malibu Rising important for understanding those other books?
I wouldn't say it's crucial, but it does give you more insight into those other stories. For example, in Daisy Jones and the Six, Riva is this charismatic but ultimately destructive guy. But in Malibu Rising, we see him younger, full of dreams and ambition before fame and his own choices messed him up.
So it's like seeing the man behind the curtain before he became a legend.
Exactly, and that context helps us understand him better and how his actions affect the other stories.
It's like finding a missing piece of a puzzle, getting a clearer picture of this whole world Reid has created. Okay, we've talked about the themes, the characters, the connections to other books. But let's be real, for a lot of people, the most important thing is whether a book is fun to read. So final verdict, is Malibu Rising a fun read or a slog?
I'd say it's definitely entertaining. Reid's writing pulls you in, the story moves fast, and the characters, even with their issues, are interesting enough to keep you hooked. You can usually finish it in one sitting, perfect for a day at the beach or a lazy weekend.
So not like high art, but definitely a crowd pleaser.
Exactly. It's a book to be enjoyed, not overanalyzed, and sometimes that's what we need.
Okay, you've convinced me. I'm adding Malibu Rising to my reading list, and I'm not even going to feel bad about it. But, this conversation has made me think about my own life, my own ambitions, what kind of legacy I'm creating. What about you? What stuck with you from this deep dive?
I think what hit me the most is how the choices we make, even the small ones, can have a ripple effect across generations. It makes you realize how much we impact other people, not just now, but in the future.
You're right. It's a big idea, and it's easy to forget in our busy lives. But it's something to think about as we go through life and make decisions that shape not only our own lives, but also the lives of the people who come after us.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this part of our deep dive. We've covered a lot, but there's one important part of Malibu Rising we haven't talked about yet, the ending. And let me tell you, it's going to spark some debate. So come back for the final part of our deep dive where we'll break down that controversial ending and figure out if it lives up to the hype.
We'll be back with more insights and analysis. Stay with us. All right, so we talked about the writing, the characters, those big themes, but, like, what about that ending? You said it was kind of controversial. Did it work, or was it a letdown?
Yeah, I get why some people thought it was a bit too perfect, everything tied up neatly. After all the drama, it almost felt too easy.
Yeah, like everyone just suddenly finds happiness. Doesn't seem very realistic considering everything they went through. But did you like it?
Here's the thing, it might not be super complex, but it does give you hope. Like, even after heartbreak and tough choices, there's still a chance for things to get better, to start fresh. And isn't that what we all want deep down?
True, sometimes a little bit of hope is all you need, especially after a story puts you through the emotional ringer. But did it feel real? Like, did the characters really work through their problems, or was it just Reid trying to give everyone a happy ending?
That's the big question, right? I think it comes down to how much you connected with the characters. If you really felt for them, their pain, their struggle, then the ending might feel like a relief, like a weight lifted after all that tension. But if you weren't that invested, if you thought the characters were a bit flat, then the ending might feel, I don't know, a bit forced.
Sounds like this is an ending people will either love or hate. But even if it's not perfect, does it ruin the whole book?
Not really. The journey, seeing the characters' lives and relationships unfold, that's strong enough to carry the story. The ending is just a final note. And it's up to you how you want to interpret it.
I like that. It's like Reid is letting us decide what happens next, whether the characters have really found peace or if they're still dealing with the past. But let's step back for a minute. We've spent all this time talking about this book. Why does Malibu Rising even matter?
That's the real question, right? I think what makes this book stick with people, besides being entertaining, is how it explores those big things we all deal with: family, ambition, figuring out who we are, wanting connection, the power of forgiveness. That's what makes us human, the stuff we think about throughout our lives.
You're so right. It's that shared human experience that makes Malibu Rising more than just a light read. It's a story that shows us ourselves, our struggles, and our hopes for something better.
And in a world that can feel kind of crazy and overwhelming, there's something comforting about a story that reminds us of those basic truths.
Absolutely. Maybe that's the biggest thing we get from Malibu Rising. It reminds us that even with all the trauma and heartbreak, there's still beauty and hope and second chances. Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. We covered it all: the writing, the characters, those big themes, and of course that ending everyone's talking about.
And hopefully this conversation has given you a better idea of what to expect from this book, the good and the bad.
So if you're looking for a fun, engaging read that takes you back to the 80s in Malibu and maybe makes you think about your own life and choices, then check out Malibu Rising.
But remember, it's a beach read, not a literary masterpiece. But hey, sometimes that's exactly what you need.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.